Hello friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking to you about something that I am very excited to be putting a whole bunch of work into again this year, and that is my mini meadow of native wildflowers. So I think we're going to start with taking you back in time and showing you what I have already accomplished and talk about some of the problems that I have been having and some of the ways that I'm hoping to solve those problems this year, as well as we are going to be starting some milk jugs to put outside to stratify some seeds for our native flowers that we will be planting this year. So come along and we will be doing some fun native plant related activities. So this is a good before shot of this space before I started this project. And you can see that this was in May of 2023. I filmed this video finding wild strawberries in my lawn out here, which was a very exciting discovery. But you can see that this is mostly just lawn with weeds. This area is south facing, it gets a lot of sun, and the fence is on the north side, the street is on the south side. So I started with solarizing this space by using black silage tarp. And it took me almost all summer to get the whole area tarped down. So you can see I finished tarping it July 30th, which was not ideal. That last bit of grass tarped definitely wasn't killed off quite as well as the first area that I solarized in May. You can see here I'm walking through and the grass is dead. I've since learned that this isn't best practice. I didn't know at the time, but it would have been better if I had solarized this, lifted the tarp in the spring rather than in the fall. Let all the seed bank germinate and then tarp it again for a couple of months and then seed it the following fall. I don't know that I would have been patient enough to do that anyways. So you can see here it did a really good job of killing that grass. I can just push that dead grass away and that soil is ready to be planted in. But like I said, there is still a seed bank there. So this is after I used my lawnmower with a dethatching attachment. And so you can see that's the lawn that it was before. And now the grass is dead. So initially I had read a book that I took out from my library called Lawns into Meadows. I can send you a link if you're interested in that. In that book, he said that you could plant right into an existing lawn or kill the lawn.
So I bought sand because I borrowed my neighbor's cedar, like lawn cedar thingy, to seed the wildflowers in the meadow. But the sand is too wet, so I ended up having to dry it in my oven. And then it was such a small amount that I ended up just hand seeding most of it anyway. But it's done, it's seeded, and I'm gonna post all the things that I seeded next. Very exciting.
Okay, so here are all the things that I seeded, and I planted some bulbs. And then to get back to what I was saying, but basically he said that the existing grass should be able to coexist with what you want to plant into your meadow. I've since learned that crabgrass does not coexist well with things. Crabgrass releases allelopathic chemicals which hinder plant growth and seed germination. So that is not ideal to have in your meadow where I've planted all of these seeds. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But this was when I seeded the meadow initially in 2023, October 2023. So the following spring, I started adding some different plants that I got from a plant exchange. You can see lots of the things that I seeded are coming up. Poppies and chamomile. But you can see that grass starting to creep in. There was a lot of wild lettuce the first year, you can see there. I ended up just chopping that and dropping it to use as a green manure, and it didn't come back up the second year, just to try and add some organic matter to that soil and increase fertility. One of the main issues that I'm facing is that crabgrass, if you've ever dealt with crabgrass, or I think some people call it couch grass, it spreads by rhizomes. And so because there was still grass on the edges of this meadow, it ended up creeping back in. I didn't do anything about that because I was following the advice of this book, thinking that letting the grass grow back in would be okay after these plants started getting established. I have since changed my mind on that, and that is no longer how I'm doing things, but in the time it took me to decide that, the grass has kind of taken back over. So my plan going forward is going to be removing a lot of that grass with a pitchfork, which is not going to be fun. But I don't want to solarize this again because I have put so much seed down into this soil. I'm hoping that a lot of that seed is still in the seed bank and just is being hindered by the crabgrass, as well as I planted sweet clover in here because sweet clover is often used as a cover crop. Clover is in the legume family. It is a nitrogen fixer, so I thought it would be a great thing to plant in here. I didn't intend on keeping it forever, but I thought using it as a chop and drop green manure would be a good plan. I've learned that sweet clover also is allelopathic and produces those chemicals that hinder plant growth. So I will be removing all of that from the meadow this year as well. So as you can see by the date at the top, these are photos from the first summer after seeding in the fall of 2023, so summer 2024. So most of the things that are blooming this season are annuals. This is a prairie coneflower, rudbeckia, some asters. This is not a native plant. This is salsify, but it is naturalized where I live, and I just love those big seed heads. All the poppies. This is coreopsis. But I just wanted to fill in the space with lots of annuals so that there was pretty things to look at in this first season while those perennials were establishing, as well as giving some benefit to our beneficial insects in this first season as well. So you can see in this first season there's still a lot of dirt, but we're going to move into 2025 and you will see that there was no longer any exposed soil, that the grass moved right in. And so I did try planting a couple of like my extra annuals, so there was some zinnias there. Here's kind of a zoomed out shot. And so now it is September 2024, and you can see that I chopped down that wild lettuce and sweet clover. So you'll see those stems laid on the soil, and that plant matter is kind of dying back and decaying. That is what that is. And that is exactly how I do that. I just chop it down at soil level and then drop it on the soil and let it decompose in place as a just natural kind of passive way to fertilize that soil. Isn't this a neat plant? I think this is called Rocky Mountain Bee plant. But I love that the mixes that I planted, somebody thought those out so that there is something planned to be blooming through the whole season, as well as there were annuals in those mixes as well, with that intention of allowing those perennials to establish in the first year, but still having something fun.
You can see there was so many of those asters in this first season, and then I let them all just go to seed, hoping that they would come back in the following season. But when we get to 2025, you'll see I think I only had 1 or 2 asters germinate and bloom, versus there was probably hundreds in this first season of 2024. And same with the chamomile. I let all the chamomile self-sow, and I don't think I got any chamomile the second year. So I really think that that grass and sweet clover hindered a lot of the seed germination, and I'm really hoping that when I pull all of that out and that's not any longer releasing those chemicals into the soil, that some of those seeds will hopefully still be there and start to germinate for me. Because I have put down a lot of seed that I paid for, as well as all of these flowers that you're going to see here. I let everything just set seed. Little progress photo. And sorry, I'm recording this on my Instagram stories. I'm screen recording. I couldn't figure out how to save them, so my garden club is having a conversation and the notifications keep popping up at the top there, so sorry about that. You can see on this end where the tarp wasn't down for as long, the grass almost instantly came back. I don't think I actually successfully killed it all. This is a Mexican sunflower, one of the only ones that bloomed this year. And some Rudbeckia. And look at this sunflower. These seeds I got in a swap, and I think the initial seeds were from Fruition Seeds. Isn't that beautiful? And now we're into 2025, starting off with buying some native plant seeds. And these were some of the seeds I planted last year in the spring. More varieties. Here's some of my milk jugs from last year. And here's our before photo in the spring, and you can see that grass. And our crocuses made an appearance last year. These are a variety called Pickwick. I love them. They're a bit of a bigger flower, and I love the striping. And the little foliage, I don't know if you can see, those leaves are variegated as well. They have little stripes. So cute. My raspberries produce on second-year canes, and so last year they produced a lot. My little prickly pear cactus survived, and the sea holly. Here's some penstemon blooming for the first time, and yarrow. So a lot of these are the perennials that we planted, more penstemon. Isn't that such a pretty color? We are going to be starting a whole bunch more penstemon, and I direct seeded a whole bunch, so I'm hoping that what I seeded last year in 2025 will be coming up this year. Plus, I'm going to be starting more this year because I love that penstemon so much, and it's a really nice early native variety for the bees. There's some bee balm. That's some evening primrose that the deer ended up cutting back for me this year. A little chamomile. It's one of the very few that actually germinated. There were so many native bees, and they love the raspberries. The raspberries were just always covered in bees. And same with, there is a currant in the background there too that the bees really like. But we can see the grass and the clover really taking over. This is my front lawn.
I love buffalo beans. So here's a little walkthrough in July. Some blanket flower. And you can see that I chopped and dropped a bunch of that clover. If you see any of those stems on the ground, that's what that is from. And you can see how loaded these raspberries are. They took hours to pick every couple of nights. Some brown-eyed Susan, black-eyed Susan. Rudbeckia hirta, specifically. And yeah, look at that grass behind that. Oh. But look at how big the prickly pear cactus got. It seems happy there. And there is one of the few asters that germinated. A Mexican hat coneflower or prairie coneflower. You can see a lot of empty space of not a lot going on, with a lot poorer germination this year and a lot more grass. But some things are tough, like the blanket flower. You can see I left one sweet clover there because the pollinators really do love it. Some of the coreopsis starting to bloom here in July. Something happened to my evening primrose and one kind of got snapped off there. There's some irises that haven't bloomed yet, but look at the sea holly. I think this is one of my favorite colors in the garden. It's like periwinkle. And one of the first echinacea to bloom. More penstemon. So pretty. Some of the penstemon going to seed there. I believe this is lanceleaf coreopsis, but I could be wrong. I also planted a bunch of different cosmos. Coreopsis are not perennial, I don't believe. I think they're annuals that reseed every year. I love these. They're just so fun. And the bees love them too. I planted a bunch more of those last year, I think, but I planted the red ones, I believe. There's a little tiny sea holly that I planted out there and then neglected. And most of these perennials, once they establish, and the annuals that I plant out here, the native varieties don't really need any water. So I kind of forgot to water that sea holly, and it unfortunately did not make it. A rudbeckia about to bloom. I don't know what that was. Here's the bee balm. Some more echinacea. Some flax going to seed. Coreopsis. More rudbeckia. And interestingly, in the first season, this is the west side of this strip. And it struggled a lot more in the first season. And then I really focused on a lot of the chop and drop. I actually moved over to this side because it was struggling. And I gave this a good few doses of vermicompost tea, this whole strip.
And then I felt like this past year in 2025 that it kind of reversed, and that little bit seemed to do better, and I think it was that I did a better job killing the grass. So here is the evening primrose blooming for the first time. Evening primrose blooms at night, if you didn't know. So if you're wondering why it's not blooming and you planted it, wait until after dark and then go and see. It is a great plant for nighttime pollinators like moths. So now we're moving into the end of July, and a lot more of these. Oh, little butterfly. These are such neat butterflies. They have two sets of wings that are like one on top of the other. They're really neat. Yeah, look at that grass coming in. And clover. So I will be busy this year. But look, the pollinators just love all of these native plants. A lot of the times when I'm filming, it will be really early in the morning or late in the evening, which is not the times of day when the pollinators are out here. So a lot of the times it seems like there's no pollinators, but it's just I'm trying to film this or take photos during times of day where there's good lighting, which is not necessarily the times of day that the bees will be out. Again, the sea holly that I'm just absolutely obsessed with, and we're going to be starting a whole bunch more of in the next video. More of the coreopsis and echinacea. So even though this has been struggling with the grass, oh, there's one of the red prairie comb flowers, so cute. Even though it's been struggling and it's not where I want it to be, and it's definitely a work in progress, you can see that there's still a lot of activity. A lot is going on. It's not no successes. I just think I'm in the editing phase at this point, and part of it has been a learning process. I've never planted a meadow from seed before or converted a lawn into a meadow, and so of course there's going to be things to learn along the way. I'm hoping to get this grass out of here, get the clover out of here, like I say, let that seed bank do its thing, as well as supplement with a bunch more transplants, and hopefully this eventually will become a space that is mostly native plants, no crabgrass, no sweet clover, and just a haven for our pollinators, feed our native bird species, host beneficial insects like this little parasitic wasp here, which, if you don't know, that might sound scary to hear parasitic wasp, but they're actually a very great insect to have around. If you have a vegetable garden, they will help you grow your cabbage crops. They will take care of both root maggot that will affect cabbages, as well as the caterpillars from cabbage moths that will affect cabbages. Parasitic wasps will lay their eggs in those, and then their babies eat the caterpillars or the maggots. So if you struggle with either of those, planting native plants or plants in the dill family can help attract parasitic wasps to your yard. I've noticed a lot more of them since I planted this little meadow, and like I say, it's mostly grass at this point, so even a few native plants can make a really big difference. And now we're all caught up on where the native meadow is today and what the plan is going forward. Thank you so much for watching today, and I'll catch you next time where we're going to start some more seeds to plant out here. Bye, friends.